Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webcast where we'll be talking about successful migrations into SharePoint 2013. But before we dive in, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Abi Onifade and I'm the Director of Systems Engineering on behalf of AvePoint Europe. I've been working at AvePoint for just over 3.5 years, taking care of our pre-sales and post-sales functions across the region. And earlier this year, I was recognized as one of Europe's top 25 SharePoint influencers. And you'll see me regularly speaking at several of the SharePoint events across the region, as well as some of the local SharePoint user groups. So as part of this afternoon's agenda, we'll be looking at some of the design goals for moving into SharePoint 2013. And we'll be looking at a couple of methods made available to us to get our existing 2010 platform into the new world of SharePoint 2013. We'll be looking at two methods, the first being the farm-wide upgrade, and we'll also be comparing that against the end-user powered deferred site collection upgrade feature, which is new to SharePoint 2013. And during this process, we'll also be looking at some of the new features made available to IT pros to really help them manage the migration program as well. So when Microsoft went into the design phase for SharePoint 2013, they realized that there were a number of things standing out for customers. The first being that customers wanted a safer way to upgrade their SharePoint farms. And the second big one is that customers also wanted to reduce outages during the process of upgrade. They were complaining that their upgrades were taking too long. And Microsoft decided to be a little bit innovative in this release of SharePoint, in that they brought back a feature which was actually removed from SharePoint 2010 called the gradual upgrade. And the reason why they brought this back into 2013 is to really address the issues around scaling and the scheduling aspects of the migration. First, on the topic of safer upgrades. If you remember back in SharePoint 2007 and also SharePoint 2010, it was possible to perform something called an in-place upgrade. This is no longer available in SharePoint 2013, in that Microsoft now only allows you to perform a database detach and reattach between 2010 and 2013. And this really addresses the aspect of safety, and it's one that I'm very familiar with. Customers of ours have often commented that their in-place upgrades would sometimes fail halfway, forcing them to roll back the entire migration project. And in terms of reducing the outages, what Microsoft have done is to say that if they can reduce how much we migrate, we can actually save time. So indicative savings would be around 2/3 of your upgrade time just shaven off by the introduction of this gradual process. And of course, the last part is giving power to the people and giving them control, which is certainly at the heart of the deferred upgrade option. So let's go a little bit deeper into the site collection upgrade process. Now, back when you did a 2007 to SharePoint 2010 upgrade, you could in fact keep the legacy UI of 2007. So your end users still felt as though they were in the 2007 experience. Now, of course, the problem here is that all of the site collections had been upgraded to SharePoint 2010, albeit that the master page hasn't been swapped around at that stage. So the benefits of the deferred upgrade option are very, very clear in that you leave the timelines to the hands of the end users. So for example, after they've been trained on how to use SharePoint 2013. And this gives you a lot more control and offers the business a self-service type migration, and perhaps stops these end users from burdening your support staff if you've done a weekend farm-wide upgrade. Now, one of the things that Microsoft recognized is that you can't give business users the ability to perform self-service upgrades without some type of safety control. There needs to be something in place which will detect whether those sites which are about to be upgraded are likely to fail. Now, this feature is called the Site Collection Health Check, and it's an extensible interface which runs on the server and you can build your own set of rules on top of the default stack of rules that they offer you. And these rules can run before you go from the SharePoint 2010 to 2013 experience. However, these rules will not run automatically during the build to build upgrades, only version to version. So we give the business the ability to perform their own self-service migration. I work with customers all across our region, and we have organizations who have 300,000 employees. Now, what if a third of those employees in such a company click on upgrade at the same time? That is a huge impact to the SharePoint farm. Now, again, Microsoft have recognized that this could be a likely scenario, and they've introduced something called throttling. And throttling can help to protect those key areas of SharePoint, front end, the memory, and also the database. And the SharePoint administrator can actually increase or decrease the number of concurrent upgrades that are happening at any particular point in time. And you can actually force the upgrade using PowerShell and delete entries in the queue. So assuming that you have someone who's starting that 40 gig site collection upgrade, the SharePoint farm admin can come along and you simply click on pause before it goes any further. Let's talk a little bit about the farm upgrade itself and the process of preparation. As part of your move from 2010 to SharePoint 2013, the very first stage is to ensure that your existing 2010 farm is in read-only. So heading into SQL Management Studio and setting all of your databases to read-only. You of course need to prepare and install and deploy the various components for your 2013 farm on your new hardware. And all of the prerequisites are very, very well documented on Microsoft TechNet. You'll be using SQL 2008 R2 or the new version of SQL 2012. All your prereqs need to be in place before you then deploy SharePoint 2013 in your new environment. The second stage in this process is copying the existing SharePoint 2010 databases to your new SharePoint 2013 farm. And this task can simply be executed using SQL Management Studio on your SharePoint 2010 SQL environment. So it's just a case of performing a backup on 2010 of those databases, copying them across to SharePoint 2013 and where the SQL instance is there, and then using the SQL Management Studio in SQL Server 2012 to then perform a restore of those databases back into 2013. The next phase in this process is to execute some PowerShell commands, and you'll see two on screen. The very first one being the test SP content database commandlet. Now, by executing this test SP content database command against your SharePoint 2010 content databases, is that it will pretty much give you a play-by-play of the composition of that database with respect to customizations. So here Microsoft are giving you a command line view of any customizations that you need to be aware of, any customizations that could fail during the process of upgrade to 2013. And in some cases, the commandlet also gives you some recommendations as well. Now, the last stage is the mount SP content database, which will pretty much take that 2010 database and mount it into your SharePoint 2013 environment. And the time taken to execute that last phase is going to be dependent upon the size of the content databases themselves and how many that you have. Let's summarize the steps that we discussed so far. The first step being the deployment of your new 2013 farm. So this is you deploying every single component following the guidelines and recommendations and prereqs given to you by Microsoft TechNet. The second stage is to then take the existing SharePoint 2010 databases and to then copy them over to your new 2013 farm, which leads into the execution of those commandlets that we saw just a few moments ago, which then take you through the process of upgrading each individual content database one by one. And as you can see, these three tasks are actually owned by the SharePoint Farm administrator and of course the SQL DBAs. And that leads us nicely into stage number 4, which is the responsibility of the individual site owners to perform their own site collection upgrade.
So what we're now doing is to run through a quick demonstration of simply importing a backup of our old 2010 content database and now running the very first of 2 commands, which is the test sp content database command in our 2013 environment. And as you can see, my virtual machine is complaining that the authentication method that I'm using, which is classic, will only claims it's supported in SharePoint 2013. So this is one of a number of different types of errors that can come up during the process of running a test against your old 2010 database. I think a lot of customers that I've helped in the past, the output here is almost going through a matrix style experience in terms of all the various errors, back customizations, etc. So we've also mounted the content database in the background, and what you'll see is a site collection owner or administrator is your old 2010 site. And at the top of the screen there, we can see that the start now or remind me later is prompted. So I now have an opportunity to click on start now, which will begin the upgrade of my site collection or remind me later. This is completely configurable by the SharePoint admin in terms of fan out time. A lot of colloquial language in SharePoint 2013, so we're now being asked to prepare for takeoff. And by clicking the upgrade this site collection, now kicks off the process of taking my old 2010 site to new SharePoint 2013 experience. One last check from Microsoft asking if we're really ready, and of course we are. And we now go through the process of sitting and waiting. So the upgrade is now in process. All of my things that I used to see in SharePoint 2010 around my web parts and documents and data are now being upgraded to the new SharePoint 2013 experience. There is a useful log file made available to me as an end user if I run into problems that I can send to the IT help desk folks as well. A great utility for troubleshooting. Now, as I mentioned at the top of this session, lots of things have been taking place in the background, throttling, all of my health checks are taking place. Until SharePoint 2013 is finally completed with this transaction, I can now successfully visit my site collection, which will now have the look and feel of SharePoint 2013. So we can now see that the upgrade is completed successfully. I have some warnings, some errors, the start and end time. I can send the log file to my system administrator providing problems. So all this information you see on screen now can be analyzed by our support folks. But generally, if I'm happy, I can now revisit the same site collection, which has all of the branding and themes that SharePoint 2013 has, along with all my documents that have been successfully migrated or upgraded to the 2013 experience. So that was just a very, very quick demonstration of how the gradual upgrade process looks like from an end user's perspective.
So there are alternative means of migrating from previous versions of SharePoint into 2013, and that is with leveraging third-party tooling. And I've had experience with third-party tools in the past, and they're great for any size environment. I've used third-party tools for the multi-terabyte type deployments through to the few hundred gig type deployments. And they're really great for restructuring content and changing the information architecture either pre or post migration. And I use the analogy of moving home. When many of us move from house to house, we take the chance to throw away furniture, to clean things up. And the same analogy can also be used when talking about SharePoint, in that we may take the chance before we migrate to actually promote sites, subsites to site collections, or to demote site collections to subsites, or to even simply relocate document libraries from one web app or one site collection to another. Of course, with third-party tools, you have the security around preserving all of your valuable metadata and your permissions during that process as well. Third-party tooling can also provide a direct migration path from 07 to 2013, which is a path that Microsoft do not support natively. So there are, again, advantages for those of you who are running MOS 2007 farms to get directly into 2013 without having to stand up a staging environment. We saw earlier on how difficult it could be to actually interpret the actual command line results, which indicate all of the aspects that could fail during the process of migration. So this is where third-party tooling can come into play, where you can have a nice graphical interface which scans your entire SharePoint farm, gives you that view of the composition with respect to customizations, with respect to number of objects and versions, etc. And of course the granularity, being able to select what you wish to migrate rather than doing a pound for pound migration. So perhaps this is really a great opportunity to realize some savings on storage in the new world in 2013. Third-party tools also allow you to run the migration during business hours, which means that users are not impacted. You have the full and incremental migration options, which allow you to really expose SharePoint in 2013 in an accurate manner during the process of the actual migration itself. And the support that comes with it as well. Most third-party tools will give you that 24/7 technical support in case of any issues en route. Of course, then there's the discussion around cost. Investing in a third-party tools requires an initial outlay for licensing and support. So this also needs to be considered whilst you're making that decision as to whether to do things natively, if you can, and versus using a third-party tool to help you with your migration. Let's summarize what we've been discussing so far. And again, thank you so much for tuning into this migration webcast this afternoon. Before anything begins, ensure that you got everything backed up on your original SharePoint farm first. The second stage is to ensure that all of your services have been upgraded as per Microsoft's best practice. So all of these in turn around your search, your profile, MMS, secure store databases, project server if you're using that. Stage number 3 is to then take care of the content databases, and we've discussed that this afternoon as to how you can perform that backup and the restore, and then use the commandlets to perform the upgrade into the 2013 environment. At this stage, we now hand over to the business to allow our business owners to then perform their own site collection upgrades at their leisure. And of course, for the users to then take advantage of the really enhanced search that is available in SharePoint 2013, the last stage is to ensure that all of your content has been successfully re-indexed. There will be a lot of online literature made available to you which discuss migrations from previous versions of SharePoint to newer versions. But we also have a number of white papers and solution briefs available on our website, avpoint.com, where we also talk about projects that we've worked on and also give you a view as to what best practices could help you as well. Do feel free to visit us again on avpoint.com and also to follow us on the social media networks such as Twitter and Facebook. And again, thanks so much for dialing into this afternoon's webcast.